Today we will discuss about actions of the glucocorticoids or the cortisol. Now the metabolic actions are all on carbohydrate, protein metabolism, fat metabolism, food intake and fat distribution. Now the effects on carbohydrate metabolism are that mainly cortisol will increase the glucose level. So any process which results in increasing the glucose level will be stimulated by cortisol. So like we have stimulation of hepatic gluconeogenesis. So as you all must be aware of that gluconeogenesis is the synthesis of glucose from non-carbohydrate sources like from amino acids, keto acids. So it stimulates hepatic gluconeogenesis by increased synthesis of glucose 6-phosphatase. Then it also causes proteolysis. It provides amino acids and glycerol to the liver for gluconeogenesis. Then there is decreased peripheral utilization of glucose. That is, it has to raise the glucose level in the plasma. So it reduces the glucose utilization by other tissues like muscle, skin and connective tissue. Because if these tissues will utilize glucose, then the plasma level of glucose will fall. And its main purpose is to increase the level of glucose. Then by preventing the mobilization of glucose transporters from cytosol to cell membrane, by these mechanisms, it inhibits the peripheral utilization of glucose, and by causing gluconeogenesis, it causes an increased level of glucose. Now this is the flow chart which shows how the various absorption occurs. Now this fat, whichever is present in the body, will enter into the adipose tissue. Like from the food you consume, it produces excess of calories which will enter into adipose tissue. Now here they are converted into triglycerides, and this step, triglycerides to free fatty acids, is stimulated by cortisol. So all the bold arrows are the arrows which are stimulated by cortisol, and the dashed arrows or the dotted arrows are the steps which are inhibited by cortisol. So food enters into adipose tissue. It is converted into triglycerides. These triglycerides are converted into free fatty acids. And then this free fatty acid will enter into the liver, and they will be converted into glucose by gluconeogenesis. Now this step, glucose into muscle, the peripheral utilization which occurs with the help of insulin, is inhibited by cortisol. That is why it is a broken arrow. And the next step, that is the amino acid synthesis, is stimulated. That is, amino acids are more released in the plasma, but the amino acid uptake in the muscle is inhibited, although its uptake in the liver is again stimulated to cause gluconeogenesis. So overall effect is to increase the level of glucose in the body. So whatever step you can think of which increase the glucose level, they will be stimulated by cortisol, and all these steps which reduce the glucose level in the plasma will be inhibited. The effects on protein metabolism, since again it has to increase the level of amino acids so that gluconeogenesis can occur. So proteolysis, that is breakdown of proteins, will increase. Protein synthesis will be inhibited and it will increase the liver and plasma proteins. So amino acid transport into the liver cells will increase and it will increase the liver enzymes for protein synthesis. So overall, it is causing a breakdown of protein in the rest of the body. Like in the skeletal muscles also, there will be a breakdown of protein. But protein synthesis will occur only in the liver, and in the liver, these amino acids will be converted into glucose. So proteolysis in rest of the body, but synthesis only in the liver, and the amino acids will be converted into glucose. They will act as a substrate for gluconeogenesis. Then effects on fat metabolism. It will cause mobilization of fatty acids from adipose tissue and increase the plasma free fatty acid concentration. So again, it is causing lipolysis so that these fatty acids also act as a substrate for gluconeogenesis. Then there is increased utilization of fat for energy, and there is formation of large amount of ketone bodies. So this is a ketogenic effect of cortisol. So in diabetes, there is ketogenesis. So cortisol can worsen diabetes. So if a patient with diabetes is given steroid, then their condition can worsen because cortisol will cause increased glucose and it will also cause increased formation of ketone bodies. So we do not give steroid to a diabetic patient. So cortisol increases appetite. That is why whenever a person is given steroid, then he has an increased desire to eat food. So cortisol will increase appetite by stimulating the centers of the hypothalamus. Then it causes differentiation of free adipocytes to adipocytes. Ultimately, it will stimulate lipogenesis by increasing lipoprotein lipase. And this excess of fat will be maldistributed. This is important for Cushing, as Cushingoid syndrome. In Cushingoid syndrome, these features we will see. That is truncal obesity, moon face, and buffalo hump. So how cortisol is causing this? This is because it causes maldistribution of fat. That is, there is no proper distribution of fat in the extremities, that is in the lower limb and the upper limb. Fat will be less, but more amount of fat will accumulate in the trunk and in the moon. So there will be moon-like face, truncal obesity, and buffalo hump occurs at the back of the neck. At the back of the neck, again a large amount of fat will be deposited. Then it increases leptin synthesis in the adipose tissue. This is obesity restricted by negative feedback action of leptin. So normally there are some orexins and anorexins. So anorexia is when you do not eat food, and orexin is a normal desire to eat food. So leptin actually causes a negative feedback action and it suppresses this appetite action, appetite and satiety action. So when the leptin synthesis is increased, then this appetite action is increased and hence cortisol causes an increased appetite. Effects on cardiovascular system. On the heart, cortisol increases myocardial performance by increasing sodium potassium ATPase activity, also by increasing the expression of beta receptors. On blood vessels, it increases responsiveness of arterioles through catecholamines and angiotensin, and it decreases the release of vasodilators. So vasodilators will be decreased release. So that means your diastolic blood pressure will increase because there will be vasoconstriction. And arterioles will respond more to catecholamines and angiotensin. So again, systolic blood pressure will also increase. And on the heart also, it is causing an increased performance. So overall cardiac output and contractility of the heart will increase. Now on the CNS, it decreases REM sleep. REM sleep is rapid eye movement sleep. Now all the dreams that we see and which we remember are seen in this REM sleep. So it will decrease the duration of REM sleep, but it will increase the slow wave sleep, that is the non-REM sleep. Then it can cause an elevation and depression of mood both and impairs memory. Then it decreases the responsiveness to gustatory and olfactory stimuli. Gustatory stimuli is the taste stimuli and olfactory stimuli is the smell stimuli. Next. Effects on musculoskeletal system. On the muscle, it is increasing the performance of the skeletal muscle and the cardiac muscle, as we had seen earlier, because it increases the activity of sodium potassium ATPase pump. Then it increases acetylcholine synthesis in the neuromuscular junction. But the muscle mass and strength decreases in cortisol excess because cortisol is causing proteolysis, that is breakdown of proteins in the skeletal muscle. So if you give cortisol excess or if you give steroid to a patient in excess, then their muscle mass will reduce and strength will reduce. On bones, it inhibits bone formation. That is, it is mainly causing osteoporosis because it decreases the bone formation by decreasing collagen synthesis. Then it inhibits the formation of osteoblasts. Now you must have read in calcium metabolism also that there are 3 types of cells in the bone: osteoblast, osteoclast and osteocytes. Now these osteoblasts help in the bone formation, but cortisol inhibits the formation of osteoblast. So as a result, bone formation is reduced. Then it causes a decreased calcium absorption from GIT, again causing a decrease in the bone formation. Then it facilitates bone resorption, that is the breakdown of bones, by increasing the activity of osteoclast. So osteoclast cells cause bone resorption. So their activity is increased, and decreased activity of enzyme collagenase. So this collagenase causes the breakdown of collagen and helps in actually bone formation. But this activity is reduced, so it will help in bone resorption. Then effect on connective tissue is that it inhibits collagen synthesis, skin thickness is reduced, and there is thinning of the capillary walls. So capillaries become fragile, that is, there is easy breakdown of capillaries. So in Cushing syndrome also, when there is cortisol excess, you will see that there is formation of purple stria on the skin, and this is occurring because the capillaries have become very fragile. On kidney and water metabolism, it increases the GFR by increasing the glomerular blood flow. There is rapid clearance of water load and increased calcium and phosphate excretion. So again, you can see that it is causing an increase in the calcium excretion and decreased calcium absorption. So it will cause weakening of the bones. Then effects on GIT are that it stimulates HCl secretion from the parietal cells. So excess of acid will be there. So it can lead to peptic ulceration because it also causes a decreased proliferation of gastric mucosal cells. And as you must be knowing that these gastric mucosal cells cause a release of mucus, which acts as a barrier to protect the stomach from the harmful effects of acid. So this gastric mucosal barrier is reduced by cortisol. Then it is also increasing acid secretion from the parietal cell, and so in excess it will lead to peptic ulceration. So whenever we give steroid to a patient, we always give a pantoprazole, omeprazole, etc., any drug to reduce this HCl secretion. So any type of antacids are always given whenever we give steroid to a patient. Yes. Effect on blood cell. So on the blood, it is decreasing the counts. Penia means decrease in the count, and philia means an increase in the count. So lymphopenia, that is, it is decreasing the lymphocyte count. Eosinopenia and basopenia means it is decreasing the count of eosinophils and basophils. So again, the chances for infection increase whenever a patient is given steroid. So if you have to give steroid to a patient for a very long time, then it is always advisable to add some sort of antibacterial along with it, or ask the patient to be careful from any sort of infection, because cortisol is decreasing all these counts. So hence the chances for infection will increase, and they will not subside easily if they occur in a patient on steroid. Then it causes polycythemia, that is increased RBC count, by stimulating erythropoiesis, and there is mild thrombocytosis, that is mild increase in the platelet count also. So this is in brief to just show the actions of the cortisol. So it will maintain the muscle function, but it decreases the muscle mass. It decreases bone formation and increases bone resorption. That is, there is weakening of the bones. Then it decreases the connective tissue. So there is thinning of the skin. It maintains the cardiac output, increases arteriolar tone. Then it inhibits inflammatory and immune response because it decreases the count of lymphocytes. It facilitates maturation of the fetus. That is, when the baby is in the womb of the mother. Then it causes the development of the lungs, because you must have read in the respiratory system also that it causes the development of surfactant. So there it is very useful and very much needed. Then it increases glomerular filtration and free water clearance, and modulates emotional tone and wakefulness. So these effects are now, this effect, anti-inflammatory effect, is non-physiological. That is, normally in the body, when the cortisol is produced, then this anti-inflammatory effect will normally not occur. But if you give steroid to a patient, then in those pharmacological doses, or if the cortisol is present in an excess amount in the body, then these effect of anti-inflammatory effect will be seen. So this anti-inflammatory effect, few points you can just remember, that it is occurring because it causes a decreased production of platelet activating factor, nitric oxide. Then it causes a decreased production of phospholipase A2. So it will inhibit this step of conversion of phosphatidylcholine, which is present in the plasma membrane, to arachidonic acid. And further, arachidonic acid is not converted into prostaglandins and leukotrienes, because this step by cyclooxygenase is also inhibited by cortisol, and it is also inhibiting the function of neutrophil. So anti-inflammatory effect is produced mainly by inhibiting these actions or these steps. Now the anti-allergic effect, because it inhibits the degranulation of mast cells, so it prevents the release of histamine. That is why in asthmatic patients, we give steroid in low doses, because it has an anti-allergic effect. That is, it inhibits the degranulation of mast cells. So cortisol inhibits these actions, these steps to inhibit the production of antibody. So mainly it will inhibit the production of interleukin-1. So if you remember, in the cell-mediated immunity and humoral immunity, you must have read that these macrophages are the antigen-presenting cells which produce interleukin-1, which causes fever, and also it helps in the T-T cooperation. That is, it further stimulates the T cells. So this is inhibited by cortisol. Then further T cells cannot produce interleukin-2/6, which causes TB cooperation. That is, T cells help in the proliferation of the B cell, and further there is production of antibodies from the B cell. So the production of these interleukins, mainly you can remember interleukin-1 and interleukin-2 and 6, is inhibited by cortisol, and hence again this will result in immunosuppression. That is, immunity of the patient will be compromised. So first step was the anti-inflammatory effect, which it was producing mainly by decreasing the counts of lymphocytes, eosinophils, basophils. Then it also causes a decreased production of interleukins, and hence again it produces an immunosuppressive effect. So role of cortisol in fetal life is that it causes maturation of CNS, retina and skin. Then there is development of the GIT tract, and most important, it causes development of the lungs, growth of alveoli and pulmonary surfactant synthesis. And if this surfactant is not produced in the fetus, it results in RDS, that is respiratory distress syndrome of the newborn. So whenever a premature delivery is about to occur, we always give steroid to the mother so that there is proper lung development of the fetus. Now, effects on endocrine function. It inhibits growth hormone secretion, also inhibits TSH. So if TSH will not be there, T3, T4 will not be there. Inhibits ACTH secretion. Last time also we read that there is thyroid pituitary hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, HPA axis. So if cortisol is produced, it will inhibit anterior pituitary to inhibit the release of ACTH. Then it causes an expression of PNMT, that is phenyl N-methyl transferase, which catalyzes the formation of epinephrine from norepinephrine. So when adrenal medulla will produce norepinephrine, it will be converted into epinephrine by PNMT, and this is stimulated by cortisol. Now the permissive actions. So permissive action is to potentiate. So we read a permissive action of thyroid also. Similarly, there is a permissive action of cortisol. Permissive action of cortisol is that it increases the effect of catecholamines, namely their bronchodilator effects by causing bronchodilation. So that is why also cortisol is given in asthmatic patients. So number one, it was because they were anti-allergic, and number two, because they increase the action of catecholamines and hence cause bronchodilation. Then there is a calorigenic effect of glucagon and catecholamine, that is, they increase the calories formation, and lipolytic effect of catecholamine is also potentiated by cortisol. In this diagram, you just see that it is shown in the center we have cortisol, and it is acting on the chondrocytes, that is adrenal medulla cells, and ultimately really causing an increased amount of catecholamines, that is epinephrine and norepinephrine synthesis, which will act on the beta 2 receptors and hence cause bronchodilation. So this is how the permissive effect of cortisol is occurring. So you need not go into the detail of the receptors. Just remember that cortisol acts on the adrenal medulla and it stimulates the synthesis of catecholamines, and then this excess amount of catecholamines will act on the beta 2 receptors present on the smooth muscle cells of the bronchus and hence cause bronchodilation. Now in the stress, as we know that in the stress, this will act as a stimulating factor to the hypothalamus, which will increase the CRH production, that is corticotropin releasing hormone. This will act on anterior pituitary to increase the release of ACTH, which will then act on adrenal cortex to cause an increased cortisol secretion. This cortisol will cause an increased amount of free fatty acid. So calories will increase. Also, it will raise the level of glucose in the body. Then vascular reactivity will occur. So to maintain the blood volume and the blood pressure. And hence, we see that in case of stress, we have a diabetogenic state, because stress stimulates the release of cortisol, and cortisol will cause an increase in the glucose level also and free fatty acid level also. But this hormone is required in the case of stress because it maintains the blood volume and the blood pressure. Now the applied aspects.